And welcome to the Area 51 betting show, UFO Show, brought to you by Bet99.com, the show with the hottest bets and the hottest hosts. I'm Adam, and I'm with, as always, Andy today. Andy, how are you doing?
Good, Adam. How are you today?
I'm good. So why don't we sorry?
I said excellent to hear.
Perfect. Well, why don't we jump right into some baseball betting, and I'll let you run down the lineup today because I know that baseball's coming to an end soon. The playoffs are going to be starting pretty soon, and we have some pretty tight races.
Yeah, that's right. So we got roughly 35 games or so to go. So first game I like here is Padres Dodgers. I'm not sure if you watched that game last night. I was up till 12:30 watching it. I think it went into 16 innings. It's the longest game in MLB history since they implemented the second base runner rule. I think the second longest game was 13 innings. So it was quite a long game, and I like the Padres in this game on the road. Yu Darvish, back from the injured list, going to be taking on Max Scherzer. So two of the best pitchers in the NL on this game, and the Padres are plus 120. Anytime I think you can get a team at home and they're the underdog, I think you have to take that. The Padres are really literally battling for their playoff lives here. They're only a couple games up on the Reds for the last wild card spot. I would like the Padres in this game at plus 120.
Okay, yeah. I know that there was a lot of people who were kind of questioning the this new rule and the 7 inning header. So what do you think about the 7 inning double headers?
Yeah, the 7 inning double headers are kind of interesting, right? Because some of the games that they're playing are 7 innings, and some of them are both 9 inning games. So it's a little bit interesting on sort of the logic, I guess, behind it. But I like the 7 inning double headers. I think it's a lot of baseball that you're playing. Baseball's changed so much in the last 20, 30, 40 years. You don't have pitchers that go out there and routinely throw 7, 8, 9 innings. So I think by having it a shorter game, you can at least give your bullpen a little bit more help, and at least give your starter an opportunity to finish one of the games, if not both, and kind of rest your bullpen. I just found when you were playing 18 innings a minimum in one day on traditional double headers, your bullpen would be so burned out that it kind of affected the rest of your week. And depending on the time of year when that happens, I mean, now we're getting down to the end, 30-ish something games left. Like, for example, if the Dodgers and Padres had a double header today of traditional 9 inning games, Padres burning through their bullpen could be the difference in them making or missing the playoffs, right? So I think the 7 inning games, number one, it allows for a little bit more competitive integrity the rest of the week. And number two, I think from a fan perspective, I mean, it's a little bit easier to watch. Baseball at 9 innings is long enough, never mind having to watch that twice in one day. So I really like the positives of the 7 inning games. As for the runner on second, I wasn't too thrilled with it at first, but the more I watch it, I find it's producing more runs. It's producing games over quicker, kind of similar to what 3-on-3 NHL was at the beginning. It was usually most of those games would end within 2 minutes. It was very open, free flowing. There was lots of chances, lots of goals. Same things kind of happen in baseball. I think the average game now is finished in 10.5 innings. So, that's to say most games go 10 or 11 innings. Again, speeds up the game, finishes it off. And I think it really brings in some interesting strategy into having a runner start on second, right? I mean, in this Padres-Dodgers game I was watching last night, I think it was the Dodgers intentionally balked, meaning they intentionally dropped the ball so that the runner on second could move to third with nobody out. And the reason they did that is they didn't want the base runner for the Padres at second looking into the Dodgers catcher, stealing the pitching signs and telling the hitter what type of pitch to expect to come up, right? So, in a traditional game, you would never want to have a runner on third base and nobody out. But in this extra inning game where the runner's already on second, it kind of sort of in a weird way makes sense to put the runner at third anyways. especially in that game where the Dodgers had a 2-run lead. If that runner from third would just score, it wouldn't affect the outcome of the game anyways. It's not like they would lose or be tying the game with that one runner. So you kind of can almost forget about that one run and just focus on the batter.
Yeah, it definitely produces some interesting strategies. So once again, our sponsor bet99.com. All of our bets are from there. You can head over to area51sportsnetwork.com/betting. Find our code. You get $600 off of back off the initial deposit. And if you do have any questions about any of the bets that we're talking about, you want us to talk about a certain bet today, you can hit us up in the chat and we can take a look into it. Mm-hmm. So I do want to talk a little bit about some of the more West Coast teams. The Blue Jays aren't playing as far as I know today. Yeah, they're not playing. So let's talk a little Mariners, because that race is heating up heating up a lot. The Mariners have one of the best records in baseball over the last 10 games, 7-3. They're winning games, in extra innings on the last pitch, like 9th inning. It just seems like this is a team of destiny. So before I ask you about the Mariners Royals game straight up, Oakland Athletics, New York Yankees. Yankees are at -125. Oakland's at +110. If you're a Mariners fan, which side do you want to win?
I think at this point, you'd probably want the Yankees to win. The Yankees have gotten super hot since the trade deadline. I think they're probably going to end up chasing down Boston and beating out Tampa for the division, which would mean that Oakland, I think they're sitting in that first wild card. I mean, Seattle is not going to jump Oakland and Houston to win their division. They're definitely aiming for a wild card. So if you can have the team directly ahead of you lose and get on some sort of a losing streak, that can only benefit you. So if I was a Mariners fan, I would want the Yankees to win that game.
And Oakland's done just that. They're 2-8 in their last 10. And Seattle, yeah, as I mentioned, 7-3. And then you have the Blue Jays 5 games out of the wild card. I know that pitching's been an issue the last couple of weeks. It seems that the whole team is imploding. Is it a smart bet to maybe put some money on the Blue Jays to make the playoffs right at this moment?
I would say no. I mean, I'm pretty sure that record of 5 games out is going to be updated to 6. The Blue Jays lost this afternoon, 10-7, I believe. When I look at the Blue Jays, I don't trust their bullpen. Their bullpen, the additions they made at the deadline didn't really work out that great. Hyun-Jin Ryu, their supposed ace, got shelled again. He gave up 7 earned in, I think, 4 innings. I just don't see them having the pitching to really compete and get into the playoffs. I just think there's too many teams they got to chase down, and they don't have the arms to help them do it. So, yeah, I'm not a fan of the Blue Jays making the playoffs. I would not be put any sort of a gamble on the Blue Jays making the playoffs.
Now, if they don't make the playoffs, is this the end for their manager?
It's hard to say. This is really the first year the Blue Jays have had a legitimately, competitive team, I guess. At the same time, Charlie Montoyo makes a lot of kind of questionable decisions, I guess you could say, in terms of his deployment of the bullpen, his lineup, who he sets out, who he rests on what day. Personally, I think the Blue Jays can do better than Montoyo at the manager position. That said, you know what? Like I mentioned earlier, he doesn't really have the arms to be competitive anyways. So, probably, if I had to guess, they probably retain Montoyo. But if they made a change, I don't think you'd hear too many Blue Jays fans complaining.
And then one last baseball question for you today. I was looking into the odds for the NL West. And at the moment, so we have San Francisco at 82-44, the Los Angeles Dodgers at 80-47, but yet all the betting odds have the LA Dodgers winning the division. So do you think it's a smart bet to maybe put some money on the San Francisco Giants to win that division, knowing that they do seem to be that team of destiny? It's an odd year. They only win in odd years. So do you think that might be a smart bet?
Yeah, I mean, it has been, excuse me, it's been very surprising what San Francisco's been able to do. You know, they have a legitimate Cy Young candidate in Kevin Gosman. He's been very good for them. Their bullpen, again, they don't have a ton of big names, but it's managed to sort of piecemeal itself together. They added Chris Bryant at the trade deadline. He's been really strong for them. I would put some money on San Francisco. I think, you know, they only have like a 2.5 game lead, but they still have a lead. There's only, I think, 35 games remaining for them. So listen, the Dodgers are the best team on paper in the league. They added a legitimate ace and a true leadoff bat at the deadline in Trey Turner. Anytime that you can have a division leader this late in the season and still get plus odds on them, I would take that bet and run with it. So yes, I would put some money on San Francisco.
Yeah, I find that one very interesting, that they have so much, I guess, faith in the Dodgers that they're just going to go on a tear in the last week, that you even put, when they're 2.5 games out, you still put them as division favorites.
Yeah, you're right. It is a little bit surprising from a traditional, bookmaker sense. You would think that the team leading the division this late in the season would have the best odds to win it. However, like I mentioned, the Dodgers have a rotation of Clayton Kershaw, Max Scherzer, Julio Urias, and Walker Buehler. Walker Buehler, again, is another Cy Young candidate. So, I mean, they have 3 legitimate aces in their rotation. Julio Urias is a solid 3-4 guy. Like I said, they added Trey Turner at the deadline. I mean, you look at their team and they don't have a hole in their lineup. You might maybe question Kenley Jansen and his effectiveness at the end of games. But even then, if you have 3 aces in your rotation, they're probably going to go 7, 8, 9 innings most games. So I don't see, it's tough I don't see San Francisco blowing the division lead, but the Dodgers are far and away the best team on paper. And I think that's why they're being favored to win that division, is that, I could see them get hot and, reel off like 15 to 17 wins and distance themselves. But at the same time, like I said, San Francisco seems to have figured out some sort of magic formula where they're playing a lot better than the sum of their parts. So I would still stay with San Francisco.
So one more baseball question before I throw out. As people know by now, Bet99.com does have boosted odds. So we do have a couple boosted odds for the LA Dodgers San Diego Padres game. I have Max Scherzer to record over 9+ strikeouts, and Yu Darvish to record over 9+ strikeouts. So do either of those bets maybe interest you?
Yeah, I would be interested in the Scherzer one for sure. He's one of the better strikeout pitchers of our generation. Padres are a very free swinging lineup. And what I mean by that is they don't necessarily hit for a lot of contact and, bloop singles, take the ball the other way type of thing. They're very much boom or bust, and they're going to try to hit a home run every time they're at bat. And when you do that, you probably lose some plate discipline or are more susceptible to the strikeouts. Yu Darvish in the strikeout bet, I'd probably stay away from. It's his first game back from the injured list. I don't know how effective he is going to be. Personally, I don't think he's 100% healthy. I think the Padres basically have no other options in their rotation, in their minor league system to use for pitchers. So I'd be a little bit afraid that they might be rushing Darvish back before he's ready, just because they need pitchers to eat innings, and he's kind of the best option they have. So to summarize, I would be on Max Scherzer over on the strikeouts, and I'd take the under on Yu Darvish.
So a Max Scherzer to record over 9+ strikeouts pays out at +140. Used to pay out at +110. So yeah, you're getting a nice little bonus up there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a really solid bet.
So why don't we jump over before we wrap up here quickly, and we want to talk a little bit about the CFL and their betting system, what's going on. So we've talked about this in the past, and about the COVID situation when it comes to teams. So if people don't know, 9 members of the Edmonton Elks have tested positive for COVID, which means that their game this week has been postponed. So we're in an interesting situation, because this is kind of the first time that we've seen this in the CFL. We're only 4 weeks in, so this is kind of concerning that it's happening this quick. But it brings back the point that you can bet a week before the game, but it might not be the best option to bet on CFL games or NFL games or even NHL games when they come to it, depending on what teams' levels of vaccination are, until the day of the game.
Yeah, I agree. It's one of those things, unfortunately, in the world. We're still dealing with the effects of COVID. I don't know how vaccinated the Edmonton team was, but clearly there's some sort of an outbreak in their team that's happening. And like you said, if you made a bet, say last Tuesday, for this Elks game coming up this weekend, you're kind of up a creek because they're not playing this week. Who knows what they'll play next week? Last I saw, they had a couple consecutive days with no new positives, but I mean, they're still missing 9 players, right? So yeah, it's one of those things where you can maybe try to jump the market a bit and get on a line you like early before they change. But sort of as a general rule, I don't look to bet more than 48 hours ahead, just because with this COVID, there's so many things that can happen and change, and different things can pop up that I just find it's too unpredictable to forecast more than a day or two in advance.
And it's interesting because, as people know by now in BC, we're implementing the COVID certificates coming in October. That's what we've been told. And one of the announcements from the federal government is that in October or September, I believe, whenever the election is, that before that, they're going to make it so that if you're not vaccinated, you can't travel on planes. And there's been talk about this because CFL teams, does this apply to charters? Some CFL teams use charters, some CFL teams don't. So what happens then? If you have a player that refuses to get vaccinated, like let's say your star wide receiver, your star defensive back or something refuses to get vaccinated, they might not even be able to travel to and from games. So it's going to change some lines for sure, this COVID thing. And we'll see how it goes with the NHL, because we already know that there are some NHL players who are going to refuse. Are they going to be allowed to hop on a plane and come to Canada if they're not vaccinated at that time? So it's going to create an interesting situation when it comes to the betting, this new rule about planes and trains and the vaccinations.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just proportionately, there's more American teams than Canadian teams, right? So I look at a division like the Central in the NHL. The only Canadian team they have there is Winnipeg. Does that give those Central teams an advantage over, say, Pacific teams where they have Calgary, Edmonton, and Vancouver? Like, that's half your division almost in Canada. So if you have a player, let's say he's the second line center in LA, for example. I'm not accusing anybody of anything, but let's say he's a fairly important player to your team and he's unvaccinated. Does that mean you're basically playing those 6, 7, 8 games in Canada shorthanded? Whereas Chicago may have another similar level player who's unvaccinated, but they only have to miss 2 games in Winnipeg. Is that going to be the difference between making the playoffs, and how would that affect the lines of games, right? So it's going to be very interesting to see what happens. I've also heard there's some talk of potentially NHL players forfeiting paychecks for those games that they do not go into Canada. So, my personal sense is I feel like for most players, that'll probably push them over the line to get vaccinated. But there are also going to be some players, for example, the Hurricanes 1-year, $1 million defenseman who didn't play much last year because he was kicked off his team. I don't think he's ever going to get vaccinated. So is he just going to be forfeiting money and, not play in Canada? And what's that going to do to the Hurricanes season, and how is that going to affect the betting lines?
Yeah, and then when come playoffs, if there's playoff players, could you imagine you're playing in this case Carolina versus Toronto in the first round, and your player's out for 3 to 4 games?
Yeah, exactly.
I don't think a team's going to be too happy about that.
No, definitely not. And, that could really be the difference between winning and losing a playoff series. And I mean, we're seeing kind of a similar thing in the NFL, right? Like these fringe players, it's kind of the untold secret is that if you're kind of on the fringe of a roster and you're vaccinated, you have a huge leg up on a player who is unvaccinated, simply because teams don't want to deal with the hassle of potentially forfeiting games because you get sick.
And shout out to the Seahawks. I think they have 1 player left. I know there's one team that's at 100%. The Seahawks are at 99.9%. So shout out to Pete Carroll for getting that done, because that he's kicking the ass of whoever that one player who hasn't got their shot yet is.
Yeah, well, exactly. I mean, Atlanta is the only team, as far as I know, it's 100% vaccinated. And like you said, Seattle has one standout now. We don't know who that is. If it's, your sixth receiver who only plays special teams, who knows? He might end up getting cut and they just find somebody else who might not be as talented, but at least they get their vaccination rate up, right? Or if it's, let's say their star defensive end, all of a sudden, you're kind of in a tough situation. Like you need that player to win, but at the same time, you don't want to be losing games because they get sick. So it creates a lot of unique challenges when building a roster. And I think it's really going to have a huge effect on game lines and also future projections, right? Like I wouldn't feel comfortable, for example, let's say with the Minnesota Vikings in the NFL, one of the lowest vaccinated teams, I wouldn't feel comfortable putting a futures bet on them to win the division simply because we don't, their chances of forfeiting games essentially is a lot higher than other teams in their division due to their low vaccination rate.
Yeah, and that's something that Bick Nazar, Sportsnet 650, talked to us a couple weeks ago when we had him on the show.
Exactly. Yeah, it's going to be very interesting.
So before we wrap up here, I'm just going to run down the CFL schedule and we'll throw out some bets. Hamilton Tiger Cats, Montreal Alouettes. Hamilton's at -148. Montreal's at +106. Take Montreal in this case. The reason is that it came out just a couple minutes ago that Jeremiah Masoli is questionable for the game for Hamilton, their star quarterback. So at Montreal, they've been the underdogs every time, and they played well. So, Montreal is probably going to pull that one out. BC Ottawa, that's a BC Lions win. Ottawa is just a wreck. BC at -228. Ottawa at +160. Knowing BC, they're going to bring it down to the very last play of the game. But Ottawa's a wreck. They don't have very good offense. Their defense is very questionable. So I think that's a safe bet there. Winnipeg, Calgary, they're missing Bo Levi and Calgary. Winnipeg at -250 is the smart bet because as Bob the Moj Marjanovic was saying on the post-game show last game against the Lions is that Winnipeg's kind of the class of the West. It's very possible that they're only going to lose one or two games this year, and they'll probably be in the Grey Cup based off of the early season. What do you think of those three bets quickly?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. The only one that I would be interested in potentially just putting some money on, just because the odds are so good, is Ottawa. I mean, I know they're on the road. I know they've been a terrible team. But you know what? Like you said, BC somehow still has this weird thing about them where they make games a lot harder on themselves than they should. I'd maybe put some money on Ottawa and just kind of see what happens. It's still early in the season. You never know. I don't think Ottawa has a win yet this season either. So you can assume they probably want to snap that losing streak sooner than later. So, maybe kind of try to play the odds a bit. I'd put some money on Ottawa.
Okay, well, that will do it for this week of the UFO Show, brought to you by bet99.com. Once again, head over to area51sportsnetwork.com/betting. You get back $600 off your initial deposit. And you can also watch all of our old shows. The bets might be old, but the content is still pretty good over there. So, Andy, thanks again for this week, and we'll talk to everybody again next week.
Yeah, thank you. Stay safe.